Therefore, we will need extra additional investment. We are talking about developed countries, and we are talking about a line which is as long as 30 million kilometers. It is going to be 46 million kilometers, which correspond to more than 50% increase. This is a significant increase, and in a very short period of time we need to see this in the developed countries. But in the developed countries, please bear in mind that the grids were already mature. If we fail to make this invasion, what will happen? If we fail to make this investment, 58 gigaton CO2 emission in cumulative terms will be realized by 2050. So this is a huge amount. Since the since early morning, we have been talking about acceleration of the administrative processes, and on the other side, from the regulation perspective, reforms are needed. Now, today, we are organizing the capacities in a reactive manner. So there is request or demand from the users, and we just react to this. Therefore, we need a proactive approach in this. Let's look at the developing economies, and actually the situation is worse. We have a grid as big as 42 million kilometers, and this needs to increase up to 120 million kilometers, which is an increase more than 150%. And it is really difficult to achieve, but we need to do it in countries like ours. What will happen if we fail to achieve this? Every year, 80 billion cubic meter natural gas need to be imported, while 50 million tons more coal import will be needed. And since the morning we are talking about money, money, money, and finance, funds, all these investments, both in distribution and production side. Actually, these investments are subject to regulations, you know. Therefore, we need accelerated amortization, and we need some regulations to increase the payback time. So International Energy Agency states it. What is the situation in the US? Last month, for the first time, the federal government just created an allocation for grid investments. Actually, they were funded by states or the private companies, but for the first time, it is the federal government who is making this allocation. They said that this is really important. We need to create microgrids. There are fires everywhere. Therefore, electricity security is negatively impacted by this. So we need to make our networks resilient. Therefore, they have allocated a fund which is as big as 3.5 billion US dollars, and this is actually the first leg of this investments, only 1/3 of it. So there is an awareness at the level of federal government. When we come to Europe, I am a member of Euroelectric, and I have just taken this from Euroelectric. So in 2030, 50 million heat pumps are expected to be connected to the system. And again, 65 to 70 million electric cars will also be connected to the system, which will create an additional demand of more than 880 terawatt per hour. This is actually a huge demand. And for this, 470 gigawatt centralized power plant will be attached to the grid, and also, more importantly, 40 gigawatt self-consumption purpose power plants will also be attached to the system. And renewable capacity, which will be connected to the distribution grids, will be less. Distribution channels will be more important. So far, maybe we have not talked about it yet sufficiently, but from now on we will talk about it. And the energy efficiency target will also matter. What kind of a size are we talking about? 30 to 31 billion euro investment is made in EU plus UK, and until or by 2030 this needs to be increased up to 38 billion euro per year, but they are not in that level yet. These are actually huge numbers even for the bigger European countries which have a solid economic structure. So it means that it is a problem in Europe as well. In our country, the average age of our transmission lines is around 30 years. And in Europe, 30% of the grid is older than 40 years. So we need to renovate, we need to modernize, and we need to commission new capacities, which is not an easy task. Deniz Bey, let me conclude here for the first part of the question. In the second question, actually I want to ask the second question. With the energy transformation, you have explained it in your presentation. Can you make an evaluation of the transformed role of the distribution grid of our country? Yes, of course, today we need to deal with some problems, but what do we need to deal with for the future? This was my focus when this question came to me. Until 2013, all the distribution network in Turkey were privatized. And it was 2014, for the first time, all the grid was operated by the private sector. And 1.4 million people were added to the subscribers base every year in average. So it means that every year we are having 1.5 million new consumers, and these are actually consumers. So every year we will have more consumers. And the annual growth corresponds to 4%, which is huge. 4% is huge, and it is not even comparable to other countries in the world. In order to meet this demand, we have started to commission transformators, and we have extended our grid. So in the end, we had today we have 1,401,000 kilometers grid line. Actually, the growth rate here is as well 4%. So we are growing as much as the subscription base grows. So how do we do our investments? You know, in every 5 years, EPDK, Energy Market Regulatory Authority, has an investment cap. And every year it is 46 billion Turkish lira. Roughly speaking, how do we use this cap? 80% of it goes to grid investments, 20% goes to technology, infrastructure, permissions, excavations, and etc. And this 80% corresponds to 36 billion Turkish lira. And we also have 80% of this 80%, which is 2/3 of it, and it goes to new connections. So it means that 64 to 65%, 2/3 of the entire investment budget for the new connections, and the remaining 1/3 goes to other works like modernization, renovation, taking the grid under the ground, and etc. What are the dynamics of today? Our population still grows, although the growth rate slowed down. Still there is migration flows into urban places. We are talking about urban transformation, and also we have the external factors. These are the dynamics. These are the factors triggering our investments. So what will happen? As you know, in recent months, the National Energy Action Plan was published by the Ministry of Energy. And let's look at the actions there. So the installed capacity for solar energy will be 52.9 gigawatt, and there is a 5.5 fold increase until and the ministry has these kind of targets and the communication is made with the stakeholders like this. But is it enough? No. We will need some flexibility. The battery for 7.5 gigawatt, electrolyzers, the green hydrogen by 2035, 5 gigawatts. Today we do not do it that much, but probably we will need it, and there is a flexibility on the demand side, 1.7 gigawatt. These are the plans, these are the projections, and this is the power part, energy part. And you also have the building side, heat pumps. There is no planning about this so far, but by 2030 for electric vehicles, the medium scenario of the ministry is 1.6 million electric cars will be in traffic, and the lowest scenario 880,000, and the highest scenario 2.5 million electric cars, and all of them, almost all of them, will be connected to the distribution network. So tomorrow's world will be a different one, and we cannot do it like focusing only on the new connections and etc. So as the distribution companies, we will need to create some capacity for new needs. What do we need to do? Very shortly. We face green energy transformation, and without the transformation of the grids, you cannot transform green. And for this, we need to do a couple of things. The first one, as I've already mentioned, we need to make proactive investments, and the capacities should be created proactively. Secondly, finance. It is really important for production sector. It is also important for the distribution sector, and they get just amortized in 10 years. So these terms are really important for us. And also the transformation processes should be accelerated. There are permissions that taking ages. So, and today, as Mr. Coşkun knows well, TEİAŞ doing so many things about flexibility and balancing, and tomorrow they will do the same. They will be managing the demand part. They will be giving price signals by making the balancing. So grid to vehicle, vehicle to grid, they are going to have some sophisticated algorithms. Therefore we need to get digital, and we need to go AI, and the twin sister of digital transformation is the cybersecurity. We need to implement this, but for all of them, there's an indispensable factor. We need young people with extraordinary capabilities, and we need to include them into our system. Thank you, Mr. Özge Özden. Now I will give the floor to Mr. Alp Albostan from MRC Türkiye.
Elektrik üretim ve dağıtım sistemleri, akıllı şebekeler dahil olmak üzere çeşitli enerji konularında uzmanlaşmış, uluslararası uzmanlar tarafından desteklenen çok sayıda uzman ve mühendisi istihdam eden MRC,
MRC Energy Engineering and Testing Services. Mr. Alp Albostan, the power system expert and manager. Please introduce yourself, Mr. Albostan.
Hepiniz öncelikle hoş geldiniz. Çok fazla zaman...
Well,
Well, welcome. I don't want to take much of your time. I'll try to give time to my friends that will speak after me. Well, you mentioned very briefly about my background. I work on grids management. I worked in this area for 12, 13 years. Then I had experience on planning in the last 2 years. I've been working on MRC Turkey. I've taken part as power system expert, and we have activities in different countries as MRC Turkey. Alpay, thank you very much. And for a long time, like you have stated, you've had experience in public and private institutions. As MRC, you give consultancy to many places all around the world. So I have two questions, and I'll like you to answer me. You're going to be given 15 minutes. Actually, it will be less than 15 minutes because we have to be a bit quick to give some time for gala dinner. So please bear this on your mind. Is it possible to manage the grid with renewable energy sources? Well, actually, the answer of this question is yes, it is possible, but we have to talk about cost. Mustafa Bey has explained this very well in today's grids. The issue has changed very well. The management side and the distribution side have changed. And if we think that we are on the both sides of this process, we could imagine that these management methods have changed electrification of the consumption and additional loads on top of this. And on the electricity side, there is solar renewable energy and also wind renewable energy with the traditional energy sources to renewable energy sources. So these have changed our very rooted habits of centuries. And we have to leave our past habits and we have to assume new management methods. And my second question
yüksek yenilenebilir
is
enerji
as follows.
ve şebekenin güvenilir işletme sınırlarının dışında
Well, if the
kalmasından
grid
kaynaklı
is out of the safe and secure generation, there is this production failure and production generation breakout. So in this respect, can you talk about some of the applications all around the world where curtailment, when we talk about this curtailment, I think two issues should be made clear. I think there could be curtailment because of the failure on the communication capacities, or else flexibility of the grids could be failed, and curtailment could happen because of this. Well, in energy source, if it fails meet the needs during the operation, some sources could be stopped. They should be paused, or else in the intraday phase, if the operation determines some problems, then they could decide to break the flow. Especially in China, in the past, when we started renewable energy integration, we've seen very high electricity or energy generation haltings. However, changing the grids and increasing the flexibility capacity of the current grids and power plants, they have decreased this curtailment, especially their power plant capacities have been increased and they've added storage to their systems. So thanks to this, their curtailment amount has decreased down to the level of the world average. It's around 5%. And in Europe, this ratio in the past used to be higher. It is between 3 to 5%, but there are different examples. For example, in Ireland, Ireland has made the highest integration level in renewable energy sources. And in 2010, 50% of their grids were targeted to be from renewable energy sources, but they increased it gradually and they made it 70%. Currently, the 70% of their energy comes from renewable energy right now. However, when they increase from 70 to 75%, the curtailment amount should increase exponentially. So after a certain level, in order to protect the stability of the grid, you have to make more curtailments. So maybe with respect to Turkish grid, I could tell something. As you all know, we have mechanic installed power and electrical installed power. So generally, our power plants, automatically speaking, limits the electricity that they give to the grid, and it is not reported very much. So curtailment is not very much reported in any place. Based on urgent situation instructions given by AEH, the exit to the power plants could be limited. We could see this from transparency, but we can't see the total number or total amount of curtailment of our country. Maybe it could be a potential for improvement. Well, thank you, Alpay.
Şimdi de sözü küresel elektrik
Now
üretiminde
I'd like to give the floor to
temiz kaynaklara
our
dönüşüm
next
için
speaker,
analiz gerçekleştiren bir düşünce kuruluşu olan Enver'in bölge lideri Ufuk
Ember,
Alparslan Bey'e vermek
regional leader
istiyorum.
Ufuk
Ufuk
Alparslan.
Bey,
I'd like to
sizi
give
de
the
bir
floor
düşünce
to you.
kuruluşu olarak
Well, Ufuk Bey, you come from a
neler
think tank,
söylemek
and what would you
istersiniz?
like to say
Ufuk Bey,
about our
sizi de çok kısaca
discussion
tanıyıp
topic?
kendinizden
And Ufuk Bey, can you
bahsetmenizi
please
rica
introduce
ederim.
yourself
Buyurun
very
efendim.
briefly? Well, thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. And I'd like to thank Turek for their invitation, and thank you very much for this organization. My name is Ufuk Alparslan. I work for Ember, which is a global think tank. Ember works on the shift from fossil fuel to renewable energy sources. Ember also carries out data-driven analysis and provides political recommendations. Our headquarters is in London. However, from Europe to Asia, we have more than 50 analysts and we work remotely. And I'm responsible from Turkey and Middle East, and I work from Turkey.
Konu başlığımızla ilgili
Well,
eğer
with respect to our title, maybe I'd like to say a few words.
aslında iki sorum olacak
And
size.
I'm going to ask you two questions very briefly.
Konu başlığımız tahsis edilen kapasitelerden sonra
So the title of the present of this panel is related to how to make the planning of the grid after the increased capacity, allocated capacity. Well, I'd like to talk about capacity allocations and capacity targets, because capacity allocations, capacity targets, and before capacity plans are made, it is not possible to carry out grid plannings. So as of today, if we have a look at Turkey's capacity targets, there are two plans. One of them has been released at the end of the last year, Turkish National Energy Plan 2025-2030, 2035 capacity targets are stated, and also 12th National Development Plan has been announced very recently, and there are targets for capacity for 2050. So these targets, these plans, tell us what kind of capacity should be reached. They answer to what questions, but they do not answer to how questions, because in each and every year there's going to be 3 gigawatt capacity addition on solar energy, but what percentage of it will be installed on land or roofs or onshore, or else what will be the differentiation between licensed and non-licensed, and for self-consumption, what will be the capacity, what will be the storage, hybrid capacity, YECA capacity. It is not known yet. Well, after National Energy Plan, I've expected it to be compensated, and I still expect it to be compensated. This gap should be filled so that we could prevent problems. And in terms of system administration, if we do not know what percentage will be installed where, it will be difficult to make a plan on the grid. I'd like to make a comment as a grid manager. Of course, this allocated capacity, how much of it will be licensed, unlicensed? We have this information, of course. So grid planning with respect to that could be differentiated into three parts, like the licensed, unlicensed, for the storages. When we make the capacity allocations, we take this into consideration. Before you ask me this question, I'd like to give some brief information. In the last part, we've given capacity allocation to Thracian region. 11 gigawatts capacity allocation has been given to Thracian region for the storage production facilities, and there are overlapping production facilities in this respect. And at the very point that we make capacity allocation, if they fail in receiving permit, they can have a chance to utilize the capacity in another area. So before these areas are made clear, it is really difficult to make a plan for the management. They should be made crystal clear first and foremost. If we are going to plan a basin transformer management, for instance, we should provide transmission lines after these places are made certain. Otherwise, it will be a difficulty for the transmission company. I just wanted to give you this information. Well, yeah, the time is very restricted. I have two questions for you. Well, my first question is for higher renewable energy generation in the grid planning. What should be the coordination between policymakers, grid planners, and operation managers? Well, as MDASH, we have worked very immensely and densely on grid planning. I'm sure you have heard about the reason. Very recently, 3,000 megawatt renewable capacity awaits for to be connected to the grid, and they are new projects. So majority of this capacity lies in Europe. So our European team works on capacity planning very well. And we wanted to analyze Turkey. But we had difficulties in reaching data for capacity analysis. So who is given priority, who gets what? We failed in receiving information. We wanted to consult the energy sector, the ones who are experienced. However, we listened to many complaints from them, and we need more transparency for the distribution of the capacity. This is what I believe. And there's another issue. Again, very recently, this has become a problem. Capacities itself has become an investment tool. However, not the capacity, but the power plants itself should be an investment. Otherwise, this could be very dangerous. We have to change this perception. If the capacity becomes an investment instrument, then it might not be very possible, or else it might be very late for them to be connected to the grid. I could specify them for Turkey. Well, Minister has also mentioned that there's 28,000 megawatt capacity is already allocated, and as public institutions and PDK and our sector will follow this very closely. So we have to be following them very closely. This is what he has mentioned. So this is my last question to you, Ufuk Bey. As MDASH, as you know, there is this great action plan prepared by EU, and you made some policy recommendations. Can you please share the headlines of these policy recommendations? Well, it was published 2 weeks ago, and in Europe, they did this mistake, and we should prevent making the same mistake. They worked on adding more capacity, 2050, 2030 targets. They were focusing on this, and they were lagging behind for the capacity and grid planning. But right now, they are working on this. That's why MBAR and similar think tanks have been involved. There are 9 items here. I'd like to summarize those items without stealing further time. While MDAR expects a standard from European Commission, grid planning's critical importance should be made clear to the system. Biden's government announced grid planning package of $2.5 billion, and we expect it from European Commission as well. Other than this, renewable energy planning should be at the very core of the renewable energy. We know the capacity allocation, where what to where, this is already known, and capacity planning should be parallel to this. Currently in European Union, renewable projects are arriving, and as they arrive, grid plans are following them, but they should be parallel to this, because if we have targets, grid planning should continue. This is what we believe as our think tank institution. And other than this, uh, grid plans have some structural organizational problems, and they should be stopped. They should be detected. There are two issues, like in Poland, where the grid belongs to the state. Since grid belongs to the state, in order to expand the grid, there is no motivation. And also, current companies, especially in Poland, current coal power plant companies have their lobbies, so grid expansion is not very much emphasized. There is a problem. And when the grids belong to the private sector, production tariff is determined once in 3 months, and it is not known what's going to happen in 3 months. And currently, the capacity tariffs are lagging behind, so we'd like to have an allocated fund for grid planning, and we demand transparency. The same problem occurs in EU. Expected capacity, applied capacity, and possible capacity, capacity investments, and we expect the data to be published. And this capacity, this data, should be involved in our daily works. We should trace it, whether the plans are done accordingly. And let me talk you through the last part. We say that in the EU, there is this principle, like the first comer gets the first capacity and the others wait in the queue. And we say that a system like in the US could be applied. Those who are ready to be connected to the grid could be connected to the grid. We could create a cluster for places that are allocated in the same place. Their applications could be evaluated jointly. At the end, this process could be accelerated. This is all I'd like to say. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Ufuk. And last speaker of our session comes from EPRA. They provide advanced level engineering services. And I want to give some information about your company as well. You provide advanced level engineering services, software algorithm services, and at the same time, our session is sponsored by EPRA. I'd like to give the floor to managing partner of EPRA, Mr. Osman Bülent Tör. Thank you very much. We have also worked in the past. And can you please also introduce yourself very briefly? And also, I think you have a presentation, Osman Bey. Can you please start your presentation with my question? Yes, firstly, can you please introduce yourself, then I'll ask my question. My name is Osman Bülent Tör. I am the managing partner of EPRA, Electricity Energy. This is located in Ankara, and we make modeling, simulation analysis in energy sector, and we also develop software. And in the renewable energy sector, for realization of the renewable targets, we make modeling works for policy determination, and for the safe integration of the renewable energy to the system, we make active plans and take active roles in Turkey and in the countries near to Turkey. As EPRA, you give consultancy services to many places, so I have this question for you. For further integration of many more companies to the grid, what are the steps to be taken by the grid managers, operators, system operators? Well, thank you very much, Deniz Bey. This is a really big question, general question, and everybody is curious about this question, I believe. Well, previous speakers have partially answered this question. This is very much related to the flexibility of the grid. Flexibility is a magic word here, and being idle, total idle inertia of the grid. This is very important. So if we took this into consideration, there would be no hindrance before renewable energy. We could increase renewable energy as much as we want. However, these two concepts are not easy to understand. Let's have a look at the total inertia. This is the kinetic energy in the grid. As the renewable energy amount increases, conventional power plants in the grids decrease and the inertia of the system will decrease. As it decreases, kinetic energy on the stored amount will decrease when there comes an imbalance between consumption and production. At the end, there could be big failures. So renewable energy sources increase, conventional energy sources decrease, and inertia decreases. So this inertia could be a danger for us. We have to note this down. And flexibility, as you all know, energy is consumed as soon as it is generated. And storage systems have become more affordable in today's conditions. There are prototypes, and the commerce of it has been also initiated. Energy could be stored up to a certain level. And when we talk about flexibility in a grid, well, actually, this is related to the increased amount of renewable energy. If there comes a failure in this process, there must be certain mechanisms which can balance the less or higher production or consumption. Why do we need these mechanisms? Well, we've had a work for the Council for 2030 under a high renewable energy scenario in 2030, how different power plants can work and what could be the flexibility need of the grid. Well, as you see, within 48 hours, in Turkey, electricity market with high wind and solar energy levels, what can happen during daytime and evening and midnight? Well, hydraulic power plants are limiting their generation. Well, it could go to the opposite of today's situation. We try to close the natural power plants. However, we can't do this because of the inertia. Inertia is a big hindrance before the closing of the conventional power plants. Well, for the decarbonization target, first and foremost, coal power plants could be closed. In order to open the way for renewable energy sources, first and foremost, we have to be looking at inertia. Coal power plants should be closed. Unfortunately, natural gas power plants can't be easily closed. It is not possible to say this. And what's going to happen in the long run, we'll see altogether. Of course, there are certain mechanisms, and thanks to these mechanisms, in the long run, is it possible to have 100% renewable energy? I think it is possible, yes. How is it possible? We need to have the required flexibility from the renewable energy power plants. Well, based on the current regulation, our renewable energy power plants do provide flexibility. They should provide reactive power support. I'm so sorry, but I'd like to interrupt you because my second question is related to this topic. If you wish, I can ask my question, then you can answer altogether. Well, with the other countries' grids management regulation and in our country's management regulation, there are certain technical criteria expected from wind power plants, but how do you compare these two? And in current regulation, are there any additional criteria to be made? I think you're going to say something about them. Yes, exactly. I was just going to touch upon these issues. Well, the current regulation is a really comprehensive one, specific to renewable energy, wind or solar energy power plants, and the support to be given to create flexibility support. There are certain rules determined by the regulation. Well, if we care about them, if we really pay attention to this, if TEİAŞ accept this in this way, integrates them to the system, there is no need for us to be afraid of the increasing amount of renewable energy, but they will not be sufficient because inertia of the system decreases, and we have to find some solutions to this problem. Based on the current regulation in Turkey, for a wind power plant, if the frequency increases too much, if the generation is higher than consumption, then generation should be decreased. However, no wind power plant works less than its full capacity, and whenever it is needed, they increase their capacity for full-fledged deployment. They do not provide additional reserve. In Germany or in Denmark, where there is more renewable energy generation,
Örneğin bu
And in very short period of time, this is going to be a topic in Turkey. And the synthetic inertia. We have a problem about the decreased inertia. And we can get synthetic inertia, which we can get from the solar and wind power plants. And it is possible. Technologically, it is possible. Type 4 wind power plants, synthetic inertia can be achieved. And as per our regulations, we need to have specifications to ensure that we have the power plants like this. We need to put them in our regulations, and the new power plant should be designed as per the regulations, and there must be a support for inertia and flexibility in a sufficient manner. If we can do it, there will not be any problem in increasing the volume of renewable energy. And the grid regulation is the constitution of this work, and it is good in Turkey, and it is open for improvement. The grid regulation provides you with a solution in design and operation, and if we design the compliance with the grid in a good manner, it gives you the required flexibility. And for TEİAŞ, for example, safe integration of the power plant to the grid, and therefore maximum benefit from the power plant to the grid, and this is maximization of the renewable energy. So if we can set the rules correctly, and if we design and integrate our power plants into the grid accordingly, and if we update our regulations in line with the requirements of the day, and if we can integrate them accordingly, there will not be any concern regarding increasing the volume of the renewables. For the year 2050, we will be talking about 70%, 80%. Thank you, Mr. Osman Bülent Tör. Actually, I asked this question to Mr. Albostan, and I also would like to hear from you your perspective. Is it possible to manage the entire grid with renewable energy resources? Theoretically, we can say this. If we can manage our consumption equal to the production, which is theoretically possible but not possible in practice. But theoretically, we can do the generation completely focusing on the renewables. But this will never happen because our consumption habits will not be in conformity with the renewable energy production. We will need a flexibility. So, if we want to consume when there is no production, or if there is overproduction but we don't want to consume, if we can establish this balance, then it is possible. Technologically, there are some mechanisms like international interconnections, all the storage systems, battery systems. So it will be a complete balance between production and consumption. Of course, there is a cost for this, but in time the cost will go down. So what matters is to use these technologies focusing on this balance between production and consumption. Storage will not be enough on its own. Of course, it is required, but sometimes when we have overproduction, which is higher than the amount we can store, we will need to interrupt the production. For example, the very first day of the Ramazan Bayram, there is a reduction in consumption. People don't use electricity, and you have a huge amount of electricity in your hand, and you don't know what to do with it. So, in such kind of scenarios, definitely we will stop it. In such kind of scenarios, we will store at the optimum levels, and as long as we can do it, we can go for renewable only. I would like to thank all my panel. We have 5 minutes or 10 minutes if we have questions. I think it is quarter to 6. Maybe we can take questions from the audience. And if you have any question, please indicate to whom you are asking your question. My name is Mustafa Aydemir. I come from Isparta. I also retired from TEİAŞ, and I own a distribution company. About prevention of inertia of the grid. The storage systems, the storage system, will they have any positive impact on inertia? Excuse me, there is echo in the sound, therefore I couldn't get it. Storage, it's a capacity for us. So the storage can make this contribution to inertia. Inertia is actually the point in which there is a balance between production and consumption. When there is this balance, the kinetic energy of the rotating machines, actually that kinetic energy is our storage. So when the consumption goes up immediately, the machines start to slow down in order to meet the increase in the consumption. And it is a loss from our kinetic energy storage. So this means that we have some energy which is stored as kinetic energy, and we use it to establish the balance in conventional work. Storage, can it help us? Of course it can. If the storage system is designed accordingly, like if the consumption goes up, the production will also go up. So if it is going to reduce the slowdown of our power plants, this is called synthetic inertia. Of course, it is going to make contribution to inertia. So the reaction, the response of the power plants, if we get it properly, it will have an impact, positive impact on the decrease of the inertia in the system. Good evening. First of all, I think this topic will be more and more important in the years to come. I have two questions, if I may. The first one is, with commission of high potential of renewable energy, we should not have any concern regarding the interruptions. But there must be a mutual mechanism. Osman Bey and also can answer to this. First, how can we plan these power cuts or interruptions? We are talking about interruptions in production, right? There must be a model, there must be a formulation for this interruption. It's like first this power plant, then secondly this power plant. So it's the planning of the interruption. Currently, it is only recently started. For example, in our power plants, when it is not a holiday, when there is wind, we reduced the production to zero for the first time when it is not a holiday and when there is wind. But this requires a planning between the power plants, because investors, in our session we talked about this. So all the investors need to be able to plan how much they can sell rather than how much they can produce. Maybe this year this is not the hot topic, but next year it's going to be a very hot topic. And yes, this question can go to Mr. Albostan as well. I can tell my opinion, and if you have anything to add, should I ask the second question? Yeah, the second question to Mustafa Bey and Ufuk Bey. Of course, the grid investments are costly investments, and when it is renewable energy, the operation costs are low, but the primary investment costs are high. What kind of formula can we create in terms of financing it? On behalf of TİH, we are financing it, but we finance it completely. But there can, it can be easier to operate or commission these power plants if we have a supporting fund. So in terms of the preliminary investment cost, in response to your first question, it is actually about how we can manage a regional, a local constraint. For example, our wind energy production capacity is mainly in the western part of the country. And sometimes, because of the lack of wind, on hourly basis, we are reducing the production. And productly, it is in the Western Anatolia. Yes. So, considering this, the transmission operator transparently gives instructions to the power plants there. As a former operator, I can say that if this instruction is given on a very short notice time, probably the priority is given to the bigger power plants. Therefore, the monitoring and prediction systems should be more consistent, and this can or this should be a mechanism which is having equal impact on all stakeholders. Of course, on instant basis, there can be some instant decisions to be made, but maybe there can be some compensating mechanisms for the power plant which is interrupted at that time, because they need to be compensated. Very briefly, I would like to comment on this. Actually, we are lucky, we are fortunate for the wind power plants, because they are directly connected to the grid, and we can make measurements for real time. However, for the solar energy, there are solar panels on the roofs. For example, they have 50 kilowatt SCADA connection limits. So the distribution operator should have the information, the real-time information, as to how much energy do we have on the system. Actually, we are talking about the planning, but I hope in the years to come, in our Congress next year, we will have a session dedicated to this. So it's maybe regarding how we need to predict it and how we need to give the instructions to the production facilities. There are lots of topics to cover here. If you are not able to monitor the production facilities, you cannot do it because you are blindfolded.
Çok kısaca artık biraz da
Actually, it's been
kısaca
too long, but if you have
bence
any brief answers, please.
HPX sorusundan biraz sesin alt tarafında problem var.
Actually, there is a problem about sound in the hall. We don't hear you well, but
Bağlantılarıyla birlikte
regarding connection, regarding financing, the cost,
sorduğunuzu anladım. Şimdi şöyle, yani bir kere özellikle son dönemde
cost for the preliminary investment.
kredi maliyetleri çok arttı.
The credit cost, the loan cost, increased significantly, and it will continue that way. And the industry needs an operation capital. And there are also the supply or the provider companies as well. And there are some tariff gaps coming out. Therefore, for the system to become healthy, subsidies should be lifted gradually. And after this, our regulation systematic is supportive. However, on the term side, we have problems. On top of this need for operation capital, the depreciation is 10 years. However, the credit payback start in 1 or 2 years, so there is a discrepancy between the two terms, and this is perceived as a problem by international investors, especially for the companies that are quoted, that are listed on the stock exchanges. If the macroeconomic balances recover a little bit, that part will also be better. If you make the depreciation in 4 years, 5 years, rather than 10 years, it may seem advantageous, but the appraisal of these companies are based on the assets, so it just reduces the asset base. So a financial engineering will be required, both on the finance and the regulations. So if you like, we can talk about this in a more elaborated manner. Is there any other question? Hello, thank you very much for this nice panel. My name is Levent Duran. I am in charge of short-term markets in Enerjisa. It will really be difficult to manage this in Turkey with the increase in the solar part and wind part. Management of the grid will be more difficult for TİAŞ, and I also would like to learn about the market side. Will there be regional management in Turkey down the road? For example, the Aegean region, Marmara region, in Istanbul, consumption is very high. Is there any regional adjustment, regional structure in the mind of TİAŞ? And these forced interruptions, they need to be planned commercially, and the regulations should be designed accordingly. Currently, we do not have a plan to manage it on regional basis. Except for that, of course, we are continuing to work with the stakeholders regarding the amendments in the regulations. As Alp already mentioned, when the colleagues are under too much pressure, they can implement emergency actions, and if there is any amendment to be made on the secondary regulation, of course, we are conveying our request to EPDK. I see that there is no further question. Yes, I would like to thank all distinguished panelists And I would like to thank you for your contribution in our 12th Turkish Wind Energy Congress. Thank you. We also would like to thank you. This was the final session of the day. I would like to thank our moderator and the panel. Now, we are going to be presenting our plaques to the moderator and also the panelists. Mr. Erinç Kısa, the Vice President of TÜREV, in charge of investments.
Efendim moderatörümüzdü. Kendisine çok çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Değerli yönetimi için ve yine aynı şekilde bilgilendirmeleri için tabii ki. Çok teşekkürler Sayın Coşkun. Sizi bekletelim biraz daha, sonra toplu bir resim alacağız çünkü. Ve oturum konuşmacılarımız birbirinden kıymetli. ELDER Genel Sekreteri Sayın Mustafa Özge Özden efendim. Çok teşekkürler değerli katkılarınız için. MRC Türkiye Güç Sistemi Uzmanı Yöneticisi Sayın Alp Ağbostan. Enver Bölge Lideri Sayın Ufuk Alparslan. Ona da çok çok teşekkür ediyoruz. EPRA Enerji CEO'su Sayın Bülent Tör de değerli katkıları için çok çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Sağ olun Sayın Tör. Ve efendim bu oturumla sonlandırıyoruz birinci günü ve gün anısına bir fotoğraf karesiyle noktalayalım. Bu arada ben bilgileri de paylaşmak istiyorum. Türkiye Rüzgar Enerjisi Kongre birinci günümüz oturumlarımızla, bu oturumumuzda, son oturumumuzda tamamlanmıştır. Gala yemeği programımız için saat 19'da yine bu salonda buluşacağız ve hem sektörle ilgili ödüllerimiz sahiplerini bulacak hem de A+'ın yeni dönemde RES yatırımlarında fırsatlar ve riskler ve Pricewaterhouse'un lokal ekonomik bakış sunumlarını dinleme fırsatı bulacağız. Saat 19.30'da görüşmek üzere diyoruz. Tekrar bu saate kadar kaldınız, dinlediniz. Çok çok teşekkürler. Değerli konuşmacılarımıza da, değerli katılımcılarımıza da ayrıca teşekkürler.